make sure
Okay.
the kid's working.
Yes, okay. All right, hi, Miss Rulo.
Hi, Miss Stellato.
How are you?
Good.
Okay, so I wanted to thank you first and foremost for allowing me to observe your class. Briefly, I'm going to go over the tool that I used. The lesson that we did was Go Math, which was grade 4 math for resource room students, and there was 7 students in there, right?
Right, and this program's used for Gen Ed.
Gen Ed too. Okay, perfect. So I used the tool Strategies for Diverse Learners. I know that we had went over some of the tools together on which one we were going to use, and we decided that this one would most likely be the best one suited for the types of kids, students in your class. Okay, so I'm just going to go through them. Feel free to interject and add when you feel necessary. So in regards to your proximity to students, I checked off that yes, you met that standard. You made yourself very available to all your students by walking around the room. I think that created a really good atmosphere for the types of students in your room because it also allowed them to do a lot of movement as well.
Right, and that seating arrangement of the U shape keeps everybody close and focused. And then we can see right away when they're off task.
Right, and I agree. I think the U shape definitely is helpful, and I also think where you're seated in the room is also good for them. Different ways of encouraging students. Obviously, how many years have you had these students? This will be the second year?
Some of them have had 3 years.
Oh, so that's right, third year. So it appears as though you've already established rapport with those students. Can you tell me how you've gone about doing that?
I think with kids, it's like adults, just a mutual respect. I try to treat them the way I expect them to treat me. They've just been really easy kids to work with.
Okay.
They really don't have a lot of behavior issues.
You're lucky.
It's definitely an academic issue they have, but behavior-wise, they do really rise to the occasion most of the time.
What I noticed you do, obviously as the social worker here in the building, and you know I'm big on this, is you engage them in a lot of personal conversation as far as what they do outside of the classroom. And I think that's a great way to establish that rapport with your students and get them to open up maybe about things not only pertaining to what's going on academically, but things that may be bothering them outside of the classroom as well. So I think that's great.
Yeah, and I think by showing an interest in them as people, makes them become more willing to please me. I show that I have an interest in them. They can show they have an interest back by paying attention and trying to complete the task.
And I think that's because of the personal connection that you've made. As far as positive reinforcement, I had noted that you were very accepting of the mistakes that they had made when they had made errors as far as the lesson goes, and that you were providing a lot of positive remarks irrespective of some of the errors that they had made. Modifications, obviously, during the lesson, one of the first things that you did, and obviously being in the special ed world, I loved it, you passed around little blocks, the
Base
manipulatives,
10, yeah.
yes. And then in addition, later on in the lesson, you passed out individual whiteboards with markers. And then in addition, you put the worksheet on the projector, and then you also offered a game at the end. So you kind of provided a lot of visual material as well as manipulatives for them to use. Is that something that you find to be helpful in the classroom?
Yes.
Do you want to use more of it? Do you feel like you need to use less of it?
I think I try to incorporate it as much as I can. I think introducing the material in different modalities, if they're not getting it one way, sometimes they get it another way. It keeps the classroom active for them so they don't get bored. So I do try to incorporate it as much as I can.
Okay. Utilizing student strengths, I think that throughout the class you were using, certain students to model the problems when they were doing it accurately, so you definitely hit that standard. Multiple ways in which the lesson was unfolding. Again, I wrote, or I should say I took notes on the fact that you started off on the projector, you moved onto the individual boards, then onto their Chromebooks. So it unfolded in a very good way. During the classwork part, there was you offered to do independent work or work in small groups based on their skill level. I think that was a great way to get them to A, work together, and B, also for you to see who needed more extra help. And this lesson was a reteach?
No,
This was a brand new lesson.
Brand new.
Okay. And the scaffolding of instruction you obviously have. So, some of the things that I wanted to ask you in regards to your amazing lesson were, what were some of the outcomes that you were hoping to accomplish?
Well, the main outcome would be that they could add fractions that had unlike denominators of 10 and 100.
Okay. And what tools did you use to verify that they were successful in this?
Their class participation, their independent work in their workbooks, and then ultimately the exit ticket at the end.
Okay, yeah, the exit ticket was definitely a good way as far as a summative assessment at the end of the
just to see
course.
who really
Got it. And I think I wrote notes that the 5 out of the 7 passed and then 2 didn't. So what was your method for checking for understanding with some of the students?
As I was watching them do their independent work, I could see who had gotten it, and then I saw that there were a few that were floundering, and I thought a bit of it was attributed to the way that page was set up. So at that point, instead of letting them continue on, I pulled them back together, and then we started working those problems out as a group, going around a room, so they could see from the person ahead of them what they were doing.
I'm gonna assume, because you used to teach gen ed too, that it's probably easier to pinpoint who doesn't understand information within a small group versus a larger group,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So you're able to pick up on those cues. What do you think went really well about the lesson?
For me, with pretty much any lesson, what I consider a success is if they stay engaged throughout the lesson, if they keep trying, they don't get defeated, they don't go off task. If they're focused, I think my job's done.
Yeah, and I have to say that throughout that period, they were on task. They were so engaged, even when they were making errors and mistakes. It didn't seem to stop them. They kept going and they wanted to participate, which I think is great.
Right, they did not need redirection. They stayed with the task.
Now, what do you think could be improved? Or what could you do differently?
What I would have done differently is I would have modified that workbook page
A little bit better. I noticed that, and I saw that you also went back and changed it, and I'm just taking notes here for future reference, is that when you had assigned the worksheet, an additional worksheet, you had kind of reorganized the page so that they were able to work on it. So I saw that you went back and you did that for some of the students that had trouble.
Right.
I'm assuming they have trouble visually organizing
Yeah.
to begin with.
Yes, and this particular program is not as conducive to kids who do have special needs as far as visually, and this page particularly, the layout just confused them.
Right, and I saw also that when you had pulled up Kahoot, or there was a game before Kahoot, that they were struggling with it, and you said, let's can it and go right to Kahoot.
Right.
Because it was just, the way that the page was organized wasn't really helpful to them. What do you think you could do to encourage students who are not as willing to volunteer in class?
Probably partner them up. And this way, if they're reluctant to answer out loud, they feel more secure because they have a partner that's backing them up.
Have you had success in the past using like pairs like that or small groups? They enjoy it?
Yes.
Okay. What else did you want to say? I'm sorry.
Well, this group has been together. They're pretty confident
Solid,
with each other. They know they're not going to, have a negative comment.
Yeah, they don't seem to be embarrassed in front of one another.
No, they're very comfortable with each other.
Okay. So again, I kind of asked you the same question. If you had to teach the lesson again, what would you do differently? And you said that you would modify the workbook some of the things that I had noticed during class, and I just wanted to share them with you so you knew that I was diligently taking notes, is that, you know, I was really impressed with the fact that they immediately came into the room and they knew that their first task was to write down the homework for the day. Because I'm assuming, is that the last time you see that group for the day? So they knew that they needed to write their homework in. The individual whiteboards as well as the manipulatives were great modifications as far as getting them to be able to do the work that you had asked them, which obviously fractions and decimals is difficult.
Right, it's more of an abstract concept,
right,
for them.
And for our students especially. I commend you for going around the room and checking each individual student's work to make sure that they were, you know, on task. The modifications that you made to the worksheet as far as reassembling the questions, I think was great. The one thing that I had worried about and I wanted to talk to you about was I saw that your student Kevin struggled. Not an extreme behavior, but kind of in a shut down, I'm not working defiance. What are some of the things that you think you need help with, or that you could do in order to get him to be less defiant? We know that it's a works in progress with all of them, so it's not going to happen overnight.
With Kevin, he transitioned this year from self-contained to gen ed resource room. And sometimes those students are the hardest ones because they're struggling in gen ed, they come to resource room, they still have that struggle going on. And sometimes I'm just not sure. You don't want to call them out on things because they tend to be a little insecure, but then you don't want to let things slide because they should be held to the standard in that classroom. So I think it would be nice to maybe have some, I don't know, some training or some strategies on how to help them with that transition as their teacher.
Well, I think from my experience, if you allow me to offer a suggestion, is from my experience, it is kind of a culture shock to go from that self-contained environment with the same teacher for every academic subject, and now they're in a gen ed setting where they're kind of there's moving parts throughout the day, especially at 4th grade, getting ready to go to the middle school. So I could definitely see how a lot of students, when they make that transition, are feeling a little insecure or uneasy about where they fit in. What I would suggest, and obviously if you're comfortable with, is providing some really strong verbal praise when you catch him doing something that is desirable and that you want him to repeat. I don't know if you've tried that. If it's used correctly and if you're able to catch him at the right moment when he's a little bit on. Obviously, when he's so shut down,
it's hard.
He's not going to be ready to receive it. But if you're able to hone in on the things that he does that are good, you may soften him so that he's able to kind of
persevere longer. I will definitely try to make a conscious effort to try that with him.
Yeah, so I think that would be good. I know that he's on the shy side to begin with. So as we're talking, I'm trying to think of what else you could use with him, because I don't know if a tangible reward would really help him, and I also don't know what the family makeup is. I know that he's used to kind of getting what he wants. Right. So we want to So we want to hone in on what's good. And if he's and you said he's actually a bright student.
He is.
So I think we need to capitalize on his intelligence.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Ms. Rulo.
No, thank you, and thank you for that suggestion.
You are very welcome.